Hello, and welcome to the session today from House of PMO, which is all about PMO leadership. We're really pleased to have our new report out literally today. Been very busy actually. There's lots of stuff going on at House of PMO. So here's yet another thing, which is something that we've been working on since December last year. And yes, quite rare that it's now 5 months later. And why does it take so long? Well, hopefully you'll be able to see the kind of stuff that goes into putting something like this together. And essentially we have a report that is just now available on the website. We'll give you a link to that as we go through the session today. But today's session is all about the report. What we decided to do is obviously give you some highlights. There is a lot in there. As ever, you'll be able to see when you go and have a look at it that it's in true House PMO style, that there's a lot of information there, a lot of insights. And so today we've got just myself and Eileen. And so Eileen, do you want to bring up the presentation?
I do. While I do that, can I just say, as ever, guys, when we run these webinars, we kind of let you all join in. So do open your chat box. We've already kind of started the chat, so open the chat box. And if you do want to kind of add anything to the conversation, just kind of stick it in there. We may kind of bring you into the conversation. So feel free to have your side conversations as we go. Often, the world is much richer when you've got more than just me and Lindsay talking about something.
Yes. So
everybody should hopefully be able to see the presentation. So for those people who don't know Lindsay.
Yeah, well, it's me. There's a lot of, it's really funny when I'm putting this together, there's a lot going with 2 X's right at the top. But that's just to give you an idea about where I've come from, really. But it's not all about the past, it's about where I'm at now. Obviously, co-founder of House of PMO, did PMO Flash Mob before that, done some book stuff, do some writing stuff, do some advising people stuff. But essentially, all you need to know is that it's all about PMO, and that's totally what is my bag. Eileen, how about you?
I'm about the same, really. So I spent lots of times running a PMO, and what's really sad now, I think my time on the other side of the table and doing the kind of consulting and training and coaching is now creeping up to the 17 years I did as a practitioner. So just makes me feel old. And I think, what I'm really pleased about is the amount of stuff that's kind of going under that now, the amount of stuff that we're getting to do. Now we're focusing full time on supporting the industry and not just kind of doing a day job of working in a PMO. Just that kind of mixing with lots of other PMO managers and really hopefully starting to make a difference, helping other people develop and move their own careers on in the PMOs in their own organisations, which again, this report is all part of.
Okay, so here it is. So this is how it all starts. We've been doing this now for, this is the 6th one we've done, and you'll be able to see the other ones if you're not already familiar with what Inside PMO reports are. But essentially what we do is bring people together over lunch. We always try to do it in a place which is, interesting, it's relaxed, getting people around that feel comfortable to talk about what it is that they do. The reason why we do these things is that the thing that's important for us and always has been is that we believe that a lot of the knowledge around PMO, what to do, how to do it, all of those kind of things is actually in the people that actually do this role. And it's the nuances a lot of the time that make people and make PMOs what they are. So it makes total sense for us to bring people around a table, which is what we tend to do every December, and so, some crackers on the table there, and get them around the table to talk about a particular theme. And this year, obviously, be about PMO leadership. Eileen?
One of the interesting things is there's not an awful lot of people there. When you see, so this is definitely, we tend to do an invite only. Sometimes we do go out to the industry and ask for people who want to contribute. But the feedback that we've had is that the people who attend the lunch have the most fantastic time just meeting and mixing with people who know so much about PMOs. And we're going to come on to the Imposter Syndrome later on. But generally, the people in that room, just the few hours they have, the richness of the conversation, that kind of learning by osmosis, it just provides, and we all come out of it completely high on PMO life by the time we finished. And I think we've got a number of people on the call today who are actually there, so perhaps they might kind of actually reinforce that or say, no, Eileen, yes, speaking rubbish, it was hard work and we felt kind of pummeled to get all of the information out of us, but we had a great afternoon. And just it's the writing up of the report, Lindsay, isn't it, that where the hard craft really starts.
Yeah, and it's the reason why it takes about four months to do. But anyway, so let's move on to what we're going to be covering off. So we're going to have the highlights of the PMO Leadership report. And these are the things that we're going to be covering off today. So we're going to talk about why we've chosen this particular theme. We're doing some self-recognition, wider leadership, PMO as a leader, developing skills, imposter syndrome, knowledge, skills and behaviours, and conclusions and takeaways. So there's going to be quite a lot that we're going to pack in before we finish on the hour.
Yeah. And we can't cover absolutely everything in the report. So Lindsay's put the link in chat already, and we'll do it again as we get towards the end. This is really to give you a flavour of some of the, it's like a 10-course taster menu we're going to give you from the session we did. So why did we do leadership, Lindsay?
Well, I wanted to do it because the previous year was a subject that was really difficult to write about. AI, and so can we have something that's just a little bit more people focused? Well, that was honestly, one of the things that I wanted to do. But the other thing that was really obvious to us is that there's a lot of stuff out there about leadership, and there's nothing specifically, as far as I could see. We did have a look through, research banks and stuff like that to see if anybody had actually written anything about PMO leadership specifically, and that means PMO, a manager or a director, i.e. somebody who is leading a PMO, but also thinking about the PMO itself. Is that got a leadership kind of role? Also the people within it. It's not necessarily about people with the managers and directors. There's a lot of things that that comes up around leadership, and but yeah, there wasn't anything specifically around PMO. I thought, well, I like to think that that's what House of PMO should be doing, is looking at some subject areas that are perhaps not been well trodden before, and see if we can see what we can see what we can understand. So the way that we obviously do these things is that everybody has a piece of a menu, as it were. You'll see these in all the previous reports we do. You'll see all the questions that we don't religiously ask everybody. We don't go through, and now the next question is. The conversation does flow, and a lot of the questions do get kind of covered off. But what I do is I like to share these questions, because I also like to think that when you read the report, you might think about answering those questions yourself, but also as your PMO team might enjoy answering those questions, perhaps as another away day that you might have as a PMO team meeting. So those are the questions. So that's why we went with leadership. Partly, I
think the other thing is as well is when we did the competency framework, we talked about, when we were talking about PMO management, which is definitely in the competence framework, we had lots of conversations with the working groups who pulled that together about kind of PMO management and what have you, and we made a conscious decision to say that actually there are competence frameworks about leadership and management, about kind of leading your team and doing performance appraisals and all of that kind of stuff. And so we deliberately referred to the leadership management competence framework, and didn't go into a huge amount of detail in the competence framework around this area. So again, a lot of what we spend our time with is kind of building up on our knowledge and previous kind of conversations in terms of kind of what the next thing is we look at. So I think it was a natural follow on from the work we've done and some of the work we chose not to do around the competence framework.
Okay, you'll also notice in some of those questions there isn't a specific question about the PMO, which is actually what came out of the lunch itself. One of those like, oh yeah, not thought of that. So we'll show you that one that actually came out as and kind of hit everybody and like, oh yeah. So we'll get into that one. So in terms of a leadership, what we did is, like I said, there's a lot of stuff out there already. I'm sure you were well aware. I went delving into some research stuff around leadership and pulled out some of the ones that I really liked. I think all three of them slightly different. I must admit I like the more recent one there on the right hand side, but we start off with the report obviously just talking about what is leadership, just so we all know what we're talking about here. So yeah, that's we start off with those kind of plugs. However, one of the questions that we get into with the managers was to ask them specifically about where they, have they done any reading, any research, picked up books around leadership and that kind of stuff. There are obviously lots of different kind of frameworks and, things that you can, subscribe to, as it were. And over the course of the lunch, it became obvious that there was two that all the managers and directors had kind of utilised or pulled out from that. And Eileen will take you through which those two were.
So the first one was servant leadership. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I kind of subscribe to this one, not necessarily by choice. I always say through technical incompetence. So when I used to work in kind of technical teams, I used to do the management role because I was less technically competent than everybody else. And I always used to see kind of my role was there so my technical teams could actually kind of do their job. And I think a lot of these kind of theories, we think, oh no, somebody's kind of done some real thinking about this. And actually a lot of the theories are based on observations in terms of kind of how people naturally behave. But this kind of servant leadership worked because I think a lot of what we do is based on a support, and I use that word support, and people can, I don't mean admin, but kind of supporting the organisation delivering their portfolio of change across the organisation. So I think it's an interesting bit in terms of kind of that came out as one of them. And as Lindsay's kind of put there in chat, it's definitely the one that's kind of quoted consistently with those organisations that have adopted an agile delivery method. But I think the other one, which again is very much in my bag of because I've run a number of kind of courses and sessions on this, is this whole concept of Simon George's authentic leadership. So this is very much about based on individuals' character and personality. So it's very much a kind of a personal thing, and about recognizing that leadership is not a specific set of activities, but it's you doing what you need to do, using your skills and capabilities and your own personality and your own experience to drive that forward. And I think the other thing that I really like about kind of the authentic leadership, and why I think this is kind of really important from a PMO management perspective, is because a lot of the PMOs that have been successful are genuinely driven by the individual who's leading that PMO. So it's because they've been recognised as being adding value to the organisation, not necessarily the department. People kind of don't necessarily see the department, they actually see the people in the department. So I think the authentic leadership and the servant leadership definitely both play a great part in the role that we do, and is a reflection of the type of people who take a PMO management role.
Do you know what I really think about that as well with the authentic leadership? I think what came out of it was that because a lot of people don't or find themselves in a position where they may be leading in whatever way that might take, is that it happens to you. It's not something that you get ready for. It's not something that you train for. So I think you naturally, certainly when you first start in that field, in those leadership type roles, but authentic leadership is the obvious one. It's like, well, you don't know anything else. You're not being trained, so you've got to kind of go with what you as an individual your own characteristics and personality surely are going to be where you start from. So,
and I think the authentic leadership bit comes as that level of integrity, which again, you know, when you think about it, actually absolutely sits with the role of the PMO. We're there to be the kind of the honest broker. We're there to be the critical friend. You know, people have to be able to trust what we say and be open to challenge and debate, which again is absolutely some of the things that are embedded in the authentic leadership practices. But I think you talk about an interesting point there, Lindsay, because one of the questions we asked the people who sat around the table was, do you actually see yourself as a leader? And when we asked that question, we weren't necessarily expecting anybody, you know, we didn't have no preconceived ideas about what people were going to say. But actually everybody around the table said, actually, yes. And you know, nobody can say, oh, absolutely, yes. You know, with some reflective thought, people said yes. And it was interesting, is because they didn't set themselves up to be a leader, is they'd actually started to recognize that people were looking to them for advice, guidance, mentorship. People were asking them for help. That people were asking them and expecting them to lead. So as I say, you can't necessarily set yourself up as a leader. You're almost kind of have to be kind of nominated by the people who choose to follow you and kind of move forward. So it was interesting to kind of go behind that and say, well, what are the things that we think you've done that have helped to contribute to be seen as a leader in your organization? So this was an interesting list of things, and again, they're not always about kind of, you know, it isn't about having the right answers. And one of the things we've always said about the PMO, it's not about having all the answers. It's about being able to ask the right questions. Yes, and so we don't set ourselves up as we can tell you how to do everything. We're really there to help and support the organisation. But when the push comes to shove, you know, we do put our neck on the line and are prepared to, you know, kind of do what needs to be done to progress. So that was
perform interventions, not interference. I loved that. I mean, that was directly out of I mean, when all of this stuff, I mean, you'll see it in the report, you know, where people have actually, you know, we put in their quotes and stuff like that. But that was, I really liked that one. I think that's one of those ones that you'd probably scribble on a post-it note and just keep maybe on your screen and just remember not to interfere. But and I think that was specifically talking about the team as well, about, you know, letting their team work through problems, and the, you know, the leader not getting dragged into the detail, remembering that they're there to lead and not to be doing it. Because I think that's one of the issues in the earlier days, I think, as people make that transition, especially if you've been working within a PMO and then now you're becoming the leader of it, is the, you know, you itch to get involved, and when actually, you know, you've got a new set of responsibilities now. So yeah, intervention is not interference. I liked that one.
Well, I can see a whole range of PMO postcards, Lindsay, that we can kind of, that's definitely going to be one of them, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in terms of some really kind of interesting, you know, Lindsay was kind of talking about some of the kind of the quotes that kind of came out of this. And one of my greatest favorite quotes that kind of I'd done previously was that, you know, a leader isn't a leader because they set themselves up as a leader. A leader is somebody who has followers, as Carol's kind of put in the chat. And if you walk off in a direction and say, right, I'm your leader, and nobody follows, you've got to really kind of question whether you are that leader. And again, when we go back to the people around the table were reflecting on their leadership, it was because they'd spotted they suddenly had a bunch of followers. And it's interesting in terms of the level of those followers. It was, you know, it was kind of, might be some of the project delivery team, it might be the staff in their PMO, but it is also the kind of the wider leadership team who are looking to them to come up and support them.
I think that thing that came up a lot, certainly when we found, I think the initial question is, what does leadership, what does leadership mean to you, and all that, the general opening question. And this is why we pulled out this one, because it got mentioned a lot about actually, you are responsible for setting the vision, and obviously bringing a team together to be able to achieve that vision. And again, it made us think about, well, I wonder how many PMO managers, leaders do actually have a very clear set vision, and and what is it that they're actually doing to unite their team and bring them together and all that kind of good stuff, which is, again, we got into it, but I think it's an interesting subject to carry on and get really into and focus on having a session around vision setting.
Yeah. Well, and it's something we cover off in some of the essentials courses, where we start talking about developing the vision for the PMO and how you align that to the corporate vision, but also how that drives what you do in the PMO in terms of a selection of the services that you pick. So definitely kind of seemed to be a leadership activity. Yeah.
So you touched on then about the wider leadership role, and with this one is about the wider leadership role of the PMO leader themselves. So this is about the individual, and about that by and large they are often should be part of the leadership team within the organisation. But what was interesting and had a large part of the discussion was about the balance of that, because yes, we PMOs should be part of the leadership of the organisation, but actually we've also got a responsibility, a relationship with people within delivery teams as well. And it was that challenge between finding that balance, being a supporter and an enabler and an encourager and all those kind of things. But at the end of the day, it's this thing of the objective assurance, which actually was called being that critical friend, which actually is the session that we did a few weeks ago, actually came out directly from this lunch, because it was like, okay, so if we're a critical friend, what does that really mean? And we thought, well, we band the term around, we don't really I think
we hadn't explored it as much.
No, exactly. So you can go and find out obviously about that session from a couple of weeks ago as well.
I think the other thing that also kind of came out of this was the session we had early in the new year, where we talked about, is this really the case? Do we really have visibility at the top end of an organisation? Does the role of the PMO director really exist? Do they really contribute to how the organisation makes decisions in the wider sense? And we had another session, didn't we, earlier on in the year with Mitch Rowlands about the role of the PMO director, who absolutely sit at the top table with the other directors, helping them make decisions, who are fully respected. So that was another session as well we had, which again was just kind of broadening our thinking of this kind of senior role. So that was almost it was to be expected in a kind of as an individual, very senior in the organisation, to be a part in that leadership position in the organisation. But I think the other thing that kind of came out of that was also recognising that the PMO itself was seen to be leading the organisation in terms of how it was delivering its change. So, we often talk about being an exemplar of kind of how we do things. And there's certainly a number of people we've had several conversations with where actually the PMO itself was driving change in the organisation and changing how things were being done. So this is where, yes, as part of being the PMO manager, you're driving that forward, but actually how your team behaves, the activities of your team, you actually have to do quite a bit of change management in terms of kind of moving the organisation forward and improving their project and programme delivery capability as part of our objectives.
I want to just stop there for a second, and just if people are quite easily, I just want to do a quick poll actually, just to just stop the flow, as it were, and to bring you in. I just wanted to ask the question: do you see yourself as a leader in PMO? You'll just give it a couple 10 seconds or so. We just want to have a quick okay, in a couple of minutes, not minutes,
seconds.
Okay, all right. So on this particular session, then we've got. Hopefully, you can see that. We've got 67% of you on here see yourself as a leader. Some of you not, and some of you not sure. The reason why I wanted to ask that question was because is this bit about the last bullet point there is a real eye-opener, certainly for me, which is that individuals within the PMO itself are utilising leadership skills. So there's this thing of like whether you are a leader or you're actually utilising some of the skills of leadership, and that, you know, that slight different is a variational perspective. The example that we talked about was, for example, one of the PMO managers around the table was saying that they had spent a lot more time in trying to build up the confidence levels of the people within their team to be able to hold their own when it comes into, you know, they might be being part of meetings, even just the, you know, being there as being the person taking the meeting minutes, but also, you know, how to obtain and get backing for a course of action. So being able to utilize skills where it's like you're wanting somebody to be able to do something, but actually, you know, you yourself, you know, even if you're just a PMO analyst or coordinator or whatever it might be, it's down to you to be able to get that buy-in from the people that you're working with in order for you to be able to do your job too. So it's not necessarily, when we were talking about leadership skills, it wasn't all about the fact that it's a manager leading a PMO. We also got into that conversation about, well, you know, actually there are some leadership skills being utilized here. It doesn't matter you know, what your job is. It's not necessarily a hierarchical thing.
Well, it's about, isn't it? It's about motivating and inspiring people to actually do project delivery in a different way, to kind of utilize some of the tools and techniques, and coach them in terms of improving their own skills and capability and their ability to be more successful in the delivery of projects and programs.
I mean, the other thing as well is that people within the PMO, you know, analysts or, you know, whoever you might be, you're often expected to take a leadership type role for certain initiatives, whether that be putting in new services, you know, putting a new tool in place. So does that also make them a leader? And this is just the second poll that I just want to just quickly put out there, is that, do you agree that anyone in the PMO can be a leader? But it's not necessarily the person who is that head of the PMO. So
I remember having a very kind of personal conversation about this when we were at the table about even small children can be leaders. About, you know, we use that phrase, kind of, children can be easily led by other children. We're always convinced, you know, it's not our child. They've been easily led by some other child. So, you know, it reinforces kind of some of the things that are coming through in the poll there, is that, you know, if people follow, then potentially they're going to be a leader. So if people follow the advice, guidance, instruction, example behaviours of people in the PMO, regardless of their skills, experience, then they are being a leader.
Yeah, well, there you can see the poll results, and as Chris mentions, it has to be a leader. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So thanks for that. It was one of those insights that's kind of like hit us and just said, yeah, why are we sitting here just talking about you guys that are actually leading PMOs when you should be, you know, because we had a whole conversation around leading different generations and stuff like that as well. So very much about conversations around the team. Okay, all right. Do you want to move on? Let's have a look at
which kind of got onto development skills. If this was something that we recognise that we needed skills to be able to do, but also our teams needed skills to be doing, then it's obviously something we needed to kind of look into a little bit more. And there was a whole range, you know, unsurprisingly, there was a whole range of ways where we could develop our knowledge and skills around leadership. So we had this interesting kind of conversation about who we saw in our organisation, who we saw across the industry in our network were good leaders and role models for us to follow. And actually that played an awfully big part, as well as kind of doing reading and some theory and some formal training. A lot of executive coaching isn't about kind of passing on kind of the technical skills. It is about doing that kind of leadership aspect. So coaching came out. A lot of organizations actually have leadership programs that they put their senior management through. And so the PMO managers would typically kind of pick up on that, but it doesn't necessarily go down all of the levels in the organization. And there was one bit which was a particular kind of, and has always been a big thing for me, is this whole kind of what we call reflective practice. So this is, there's lots of other kind of leadership behaviors, models that kind of use this. And Stephen Covey was a big one about having reflecting on the decisions that we make and going back in 2, 3, 4 weeks, months time, and just reflecting on that decision we made. What was the outcomes of that? What was the right decision? Could I have had more information? And you know, for those of you who have been bored with me before, I did my master's thesis on professional development and development of professional development, and it's absolutely integral to professional development is this ability to kind of look back in terms of what have we learned. So yes, we're all used to the lessons learned, but it's certainly a kind of a key part to understand and reflect on what we've done and whether it's been successful or not.
I think a couple of things that I wanted to pull out is that there was very much this thing about, we all know that people are very time poor, so people were again, the managers were thumbs up for bite-sized learning, especially for, you know, this just needs, sometimes you just need just a little thing. Doesn't need to be a big training course or anything else. It's just sometimes it can just be a small thing that you might read or a small video or something like that. They definitely advocate that kind of thing. The other thing was they also found that they would develop themselves quite dramatically with the feedback that they received from the people within the team. I mean, as an example in the report, quite brutal, I think, one of the managers' experiences of how they did that, and that also, I think like anything, there's a lot of development that comes from different challenges and being in that situation, and you know, it's like anything, we hear it all the time, but you know, not being afraid to fail, and then sometimes approaches you might take might not work. But, you know, again, that's where the growth comes from. So there's definitely a growth mindset if you're going to work, you know, in leadership, any kind of leadership position.
Yeah. And I put it there, the kind of that whole 70-20-10 aspect, isn't it? Is that you know, kind of you're going to get a lot of your kind of real learning and development actually doing that. And you know, it goes back to kind of one of the elements of authentic leadership as well, is actually being quite open with your team and your kind of the people who you work with, demonstrating a level of vulnerability and saying, you know, I'm new at this kind of leadership role, been put in charge or whatever, so I'm looking for some support and some feedback, you know, and I'm going to be feeling my way, and I may well make mistakes. And I think that, you know, that was one of the things that came through when we talked, when people actually around the table recognize themselves as leaders, it's because they've been through that learning. You know, they've learned over time the things that people have appreciated. And I suspect that not a single one around that table had kind of walked into that role and been fantastic. Which is really interesting, because that leads us to kind of what was quite a detailed conversation around imposter syndrome. Now, I'm sure a lot of people, you know, that you'll pick up the report and you look at those people, and so they're all kind of very senior and they're all kind of doing amazing jobs and having a great time. But imposter syndrome is rife across the PMO, and I have to say, it's not necessarily just within the PMO. It's kind of recognized, and we just explored it. And there was quite a few people, wasn't there, Lindsay, who kind of said, actually, I still suffer from imposter syndrome on a day-to-day basis when I'm in there kind of doing my day job.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all about the self-doubt. I mean, there was one particular quote which is, you said, you know what you're saying is right, you know what you're doing is correct, but you've never realised that that seat at the table is actually yours, and you almost feel like you shouldn't be there. That you're going way past where you should be. It's self-doubt, and I get used to it, but you know, they don't suffer from it anymore. And I think from researchers that the more that you feel like you belong in a certain environment, the less likely you are to feel like an imposter. And I think it's, you know, it's one of those things that more experience and over time, but also there's always going to be new challenges. Because we're working in PMOs that are changing, businesses are changing. There are going to be some times when your environment is changing, and therefore you're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit of self-doubt. There's a little bit again in the report about how you can overcome this kind of stuff. But again, if it's a subject that you want to delve into deeper, there's a lot more I would say more recent research that's come out, you know, as literally as you know, last year, that's really interesting. And I you know, go and read it, because I think you know, you'll recognize the symptoms, as it were. But it's also reassuring to know that you know, that everybody has self-doubt. And we did a poll on the website all the way through April, and you can see exactly how people feel. So this is just obviously for PMO people that are visiting the website. I think it's pretty statistically sound by a number of people that took part in it. But yeah, people have it, but it's like, it's one of those things that you know, maybe time, experience, but like I say, you never know what's around the corner with PMOs, do you?
Do you know the most interesting thing about that poll? The only option that got 0 responses was no, which meant everybody at kind of some point, you know, apart from being not sure, but nobody was absolutely adamant that no, I absolutely have never felt imposter syndrome. So interesting kind of takeaway from that report. So that's kind of generic things, and of course we have to refer back to the competency framework, because we would have done a great disservice if we completely missed out anything in relation to kind of the knowledge, skills and behavior that you need to be able to develop your leadership skills.
So why is it not a competence in the competency framework?
Well, because we recognize that the whole leadership and management is a whole competence framework in itself. There's got so many different dimensions to it. Leadership as a single competence doesn't really make much sense. There's so much involved in that. So in the competency framework, we refer to lots of other competency frameworks. So ours is specifically around stuff to run and manage and deliver PMO stuff. So we refer to the project management competency framework, program management competency framework, and we also recognize leadership and the management competence framework as being integral to being able to do the manager, director, analyst and administrator role. So it is in there, it's just embedded in another competence framework. But I think the bit where we've got a real kind of overlap is when we start looking at some of the aspects of the role of the PMO manager and director, is that it sits as part of that leadership role in the organization from the PMO perspective. And we've obviously kind of picked up the knowledge, skills and behaviors that you need in order to do that. So you touched on it before, Lindsay, isn't it? Part of the role is about being able to develop and set the mission for the PMO. So that naturally is going to take some knowledge, skills and behaviors that are embedded within our competency framework. Another aspect is we're going to have build a high performing team. So whether that be our PMO managers or whether that be the people who work in the PMO, and as we recognise, PMO managers, PMO directors are often have delivery accountability as well. So, you know, kind of building a delivery team as well. That is a high performing team. Again, we've identified the knowledge, skills and behaviours in order to do that. And then, you know, our individual kind of line management aspect, again, we've got the knowledge, skills and behaviours. And I think what's really interesting when we go back to do that kind of as an individual and sitting at the kind of the top table, then a lot of what we're doing will be coaching and leading senior people in the organization. Now, a classic example of this, which we've done some work on, is trying to embed portfolio management, benefits management, anything that's going to take the senior team. You can't put the kind of the senior leadership team on a benefits training course or a sponsorship training course, because it's hard for them to admit that they kind of don't know what needs to be done at their particular level. So moving to a more kind of a coaching style and take them through a workshop and facilitating that. So looking at how you build up individuals, senior individuals, is a definite skill that needs to be developed by PMO managers. So we've got this kind of coach and mentoring and facilitate, as opposed to kind of teach and preach, which is what we might do in terms of some of the specific areas of a delivery method. So it's definitely in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about the competency framework, because actually if you go and look at the knowledge, skills and behaviours, you yourself can do that mix and match. This is just something that we pulled out. There is no clear-cut answer. These are just some of the knowledge examples that you could use, but actually in your context it might be slightly different, or the skills might be, or you'll be actually with some of the skills might be missing. So it is about being able to this is about your individual role, and thinking about, okay, so these are very, very much examples for PMO leaders. But if we do think about those people within the PMO team and what is it that they're doing, what's some of their roles and responsibilities that they're doing, we will also think about, the different knowledge, skills and behaviour examples for those particular pieces of work as well. We already said that it could be that you're, putting in place a new service, or you're refreshing a service, or, making those changes, or putting a new tool in place. You will be using different knowledge, skills and behaviour examples, which is why it's important that you understand, what is available through the competency framework. And actually you can be setting up your own, this is my plan, this is my development plan. I do want to be able to put in place the new tools. So what is it that I do need to understand in order to be able to do that? That will help me think about my development over the next X amount of month or years. So yeah, it's just a way of how you connect some of this kind of leadership subject, very much with the day-to-day roles that you do, and how that competency framework can help that. Okay, so that's enough plug in the competency framework, don't you?
Well, I just think, to me, it just reinforces, I mean, it was 3 years hard work, is that we just making sure it gets validated frequently, doesn't it, that what we did actually is of value and has the stuff in that we need. So that's always good to have that. So this was that would kind of whistle-stop tour. What were your favourite bits, Lindsay? Because we've got a list of conclusions in the actual report that we kind of distilled out of that. But what were your favourite bits and why?
Well, I mean, obviously I love the authentic leadership stuff, because I just think actually when it comes to leading people, and the reason why you are being given that opportunity, or you've taken that opportunity, is it must be something about what you've already been doing that's setting you up on that path. So why would you suddenly try to be somebody else? Why not think about how you enhance who you already are? And I think the authentic leadership stuff is really accessible, and actually it does really help make you think about different aspects that you might not have thought about before. And there's a lot of great stuff out there about authentic leadership as well that I really loved. Did a lot of listening around podcasts and stuff like that. So absolutely, that's the kind of thing that I love to dip into. The second one is that I love that insight about everybody in the team being a leader. I think it's almost like, which of the leadership type skills can we be not installing, but helping people in our team to put into place in their into their day-to-day work, and what as a leader, what can you do to be helping to develop them, because they are the next generation of leaders. So it'd be, it'd be great if today's leaders, are really thinking about how they're going to be helping them come on board, because I think this is one of the problems sometimes about how you work in PMO, is that sometimes you need new challenges and opportunities that are going to help to make you a little step change. And if you're seeing these kind of good base skills in people in your team today, it's like, what can you be doing to help lift them a bit, and and what kind of things you can be doing practically to help them as well. There is a bit in the I like that. I think this is a quote from you actually, Eileen, about how you cast a shadow. Yeah. Do you know what it is off the top of your head?
I talk about it's about understanding the shadow that you cast, and the further up the organisation, potentially the wider the shadow that you cast, and just being aware about what impact that's causing to the rest of your team and the organisation.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that I got in my mind. And the other one that we've not really touched on, that we do talk about in the report, is real challenges going forward with hybrid working. The managers were, we did talk about the pandemic, obviously, because it had really impacted the way that they saw their role, and it for both good and bad. There was a lot of great stuff that came out of it for people, but the real challenge now is keeping that team together. With the hybrid working, it feels quite stressful, and resilience was one of the word of the pandemic, and our teams being great, being very resilient, and it seems to be that the resilience was starting to wane a little bit. So I think it's something that we're going to continue to see for a little more, but it was very much a subject of now. But I really enjoyed listening to them, and what because it was I think what it was is that, when you ask somebody a question, so what's been a real challenge in your career, people don't tend to remember very well. But if it's something that's happening right now, that's what I really enjoyed listening to them, because they were talking about something that was happening now, and you could hear it in their voices, and just how
I'm still working through it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so those are mine.
So my three, this whole recognition of behaviours, and I still that whole kind of soft skills area, and we know kind of delivering stuff and helping people do some of the hard things about resource management, portfolio management, detailed planning is where we spend a lot of our time. But the thing that really makes a difference and moves us from kind of capable to really competent, and from being kind of okay to being really good and brilliant, is the soft skills and the behaviours, and the recognition of that. And recognizing that in your team. And it doesn't matter, as we've said, kind of where they sit in terms of seniority in the team, about recognizing, rewarding really good behaviors, and actually calling out at the senior level, calling out those bad behaviors that have a really negative impact on everybody's success. So that was really nice to kind of hear that come out. I think the second thing, and this is part of being old now, is about just recognizing how far the PMOs come. We still have, don't we? We always have that kind of conversation around, kind of PMOs admin. But I don't think we've completely got away from that. But I think we have got to the next level, which is PMO is not just admin. Yes, which is and actually that kind of not just admin bit sets us up to do anything from, kind of doing a report to actually doing a lot more kind of senior stuff and leading and being part of the leadership team. So it's great to have people like Mitch who come and talk about their Pmo Director role and what that looks like, and more of that, please. And then the final thing is this whole thing about reflective practice. People who know me know I absolutely love stationery, but one of the things that I really like is just writing longhand. It's a really interesting bit, and I try to do a little bit every day. I'm really rubbish at it, but actually it's only when you kind of sit there with a pen and let your mind go and kind of go back and reflect on things that you've done, that kind of really opens up kind of some of the connections and pings lots of other different thoughts that it helps me. So I really like that. Yeah, I'm really pushing on this
I think
reflective
we
practice,
should,
and I do encourage the people I coach
yeah,
to try and do that.
I think we should have a session about that. I think reflective practice, how it works, and actually, you know, to see how people actually do it. And you know, I think it's definitely worth exploring. It has come up a lot over the years. I bear with, because I've got another session, interactive bit, and Zoom has all got a little bit posh, because you can now do something a little bit different than just clicking yes or no, which is a bit like doing a little tweet, you know, a little short answer. I really, you know, you've been listening to us, hopefully, you know, over your lunch, and you know, what has been insightful for you as we've been going through this session today? Is there anything that's jumped out at you, or something that, you know, has made you, well, I'd like to go and read a little bit more about that? Or, you know, is there anything that you have found insightful?
Or anything you're going to go and think, well, I need to pick up the report because I want to read a bit more about that.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, this is really interesting, because I've got no idea whether it actually shares stuff, because I've never done this before. So, you know, we're just experimenting. As you'll know, the word that I do like to use quite a lot is, you know, to be curious. Curiosity's got the better of me, because I haven't trusted this at all. But
we're amongst friends.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we were talking about imposter syndrome. Here you go. We've got about 6 answers. I think I can't see them. All I can see is that people are answering, but I can't actually see what's being written.
Let's hope nobody's sworn in there. So go on, press the end, Paul, and save it'll share, Lindsay.
Yeah, I don't know, Rebecca. You're being guinea pigs completely for us. So do your responses have to be short? I think so.
200 characters, Chris has said. There's a man who knows.
So just a 2-word answer or something would be really good. I'm going to stop it. It says so in the box. Well done. Right, well, there you go. I can't see any of this. I'm driving blind, as it were. Right, okay, I'm going to end the poll and see what happens.
You can share the results.
I can share results. Can you see anything? No? Okay, I will just read some of them out. Well, there's one, the 3 pillars: vision, performance, and developing people, or coach, lead, manage, as I would call it. Emphasis on the PMO vision and acknowledgement in the wider community of the need to increase senior leadership visibility. The different leadership areas was interesting and thought-provoking. Reinforce the skills that I believe the PMO teams need. Definitely read more on this. Intervention, not interference. Excellent. I know, I really like that. That the PMO can lead upwards. Like it or not, the PMO function and its practitioners have to be leaders. The recognition that all PMO team members are accepted as leaders. And the last one, which I weren't going to read out, but I will. You ladies inspire me every time I listen to you. Did you write that?
You're asking me?
Yes.
No, I didn't write that at all.
Thank you very much for your comment. That was lovely. Okay, so next bit then, really. Now this, I know it's, what do we say, don't put too many words on a slide. But I wanted to, and this is when you download the report, you will see on the, pretty much on the first page, we just put some conclusions, and this is the quote that goes alongside them. And this is directly from one of the people that were around the table. One of the things that we found is that everybody were dreading being around that table in some way, shape or form before they arrived, but absolutely loved it by the end of the session. I think one of the quotes was, and I think we've got it in the back there, about thanks for the group therapy. But you can see that I think that's a really nice conclusion, you know, from somebody talking very much from the heart of how they do the job and how they feel about it all. And so we'll leave you with those final words. Eileen?
And I think, and I go back to, we're coming up to our first birthday of the House of PMO, Lindsay, and this is exactly why we set the House of PMO up, doesn't it? Is to provide somewhere where people can can feel supported and can learn from each other.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know that that's working.
Yeah. So I've been putting a couple of links in, but if you go to the membership area, the report is available to everyone in terms of, free membership as well. It's just that you just need an account to be able to get into it. And you'll see it there on the Inside PMO, which sits under the library. You'll also see it on the page in the members area at the moment. So get yourself in there, download that, have a read, get a brew, have a read. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have any thoughts about it, any questions, let us know. If you want a hard copy, you know where to come. We're incredibly excited for the next conferences in June. As we know, we've had a number of years where it's all been up and down. We did go ahead last November, and the feeling from nearly everybody in that space was a jubilation of being back in a room with people that are working in PMOs. We can't wait to be back, but also trying it in Edinburgh for the first time. And a question from Angela. They are actually going up on the website today. Angela, you'll be able to see all the session timings for the conference. The last couple of sessions are going to be in there by next week. Have a full agenda already. So and you'll also be able to hear a session on PMO leadership from one of the PMO directors that were around that table, who did a great job at contribution to this report, and he's going to have lots more wise words, no doubt. So
there's a really good question there from, is it Gurjana? Apologies if I've not pronounced that correctly, about organising a conference in Manchester. Now, one of the things that Lindsay and I have been talking about and tossing about for a while now was when we start doing face-to-face flash mobs again. So they're definitely going to be coming. And the first one, where's it going to be, Lindsay?
What we're hoping to do is in the Northwest, only because that's where I'm based too.
Yeah.
So
it may not be a conference in Manchester, but hopefully you'll get the first flash mob, the first face-to-face flash mob coming forward.
Yeah, hopefully from September. Yes.
Any other questions? We're coming up to the hour.
Okay, well, just remember, read. If you've got any chat about it, make sure you join us in our LinkedIn group. It's PMO Flash Mob. We put in stuff in there all the time. So it's a vibrant, lots of different things coming out, telling you what's going on. But also remember that for a lot of things, we continue with lots of events coming up. If you want to access a lot of the things that we've been doing and you're not yet a member, do consider it. Online membership, a lot of resources there. Get into all the events that we do, get all the recordings, all of that kind of good stuff. It'd be lovely to have you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Okay,
Thank you. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.
Yes, lovely. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Take care.